So a little bit on us. Blended perspectives. We're headquartered in Toronto. Don't hold that against us. Okay? Right in the middle. Go straight in the middle. I can't walk around at all. I like to walk around.
You can walk around.
I can walk around?
Yeah.
It'd be pretty boring if I just stood here, right, guys? Yeah. All right, we're a Platinum Solution partner out of Canada, but we do have offices in the US. We are really basically an independent solution partner, and what that means is that we don't actually build any add-ons. So if you picked a category of add-ons like testing or planning, we will just look at those add-ons and we'll say, based on our experience and based on our look at the market and what's going on and the functionality, and based on your requirements, we'd say this is the optimum solution for you. And given the fast-changing nature of the Atlassian marketplace, we believe that that's a critical thing that you'd be looking for. So that's us, and we do have these horrible shirts, but they do stand out in the. They do certainly stand out. Okay, so let's talk about planning. Why do I think planning is important? Well, first of all, I did a little poll. I chatted to quite a few of you before the session started, and I know that there's quite a lot of people here who are kind of curious to understand, where should I go? How should I scale Agile? Jira by itself is a very flat application, right? It just has epic, story, subtask. It's very flat. It doesn't really have any hierarchical structure to it. And so what's happened is there's this plethora of applications that have come along that allow you to build what you might think of as a work breakdown structure or a hierarchy, such as portfolio. And I really believe that what's actually happened in the market is that Jira has been very, very successful with development teams, testing teams, with DevOps people, but has not been particularly successful with planning people who are outside of that domain. And I want to talk about why I would want to try to encourage you all, because I'm guessing because you're here, you drank the Kool-Aid, you all love Jira, you love Confluence, right? So I'm kind of preaching to the converted. But part of what I want to talk about today is how you can go out and get more engagement from the rest of the business, who just look at a Jira board and go, that's Agile. Oh, that's complicated. I don't understand that. That's not a familiar thing for me. So I'm going to talk about a number of tribes, okay, in an organization. The developer tribe, the project management tribe, and the corporate planning tribe. Now, there's probably a lot more tribes out there, but I think it's important to acknowledge that these different groups have different interests, different motivations, about why they particularly like their tools. And I've got, plenty of stories about these different tribes with many years of experience. And just so you know, I do have a substantial program management background. So basically, I've ran large programs in mainly financial institutions, some telcos. I had one program which had a budget of 100 million, and we had 32 PMs, 16 business PMs and 16 IT PMs. And the business PMs were all building their status reports and sending them in on a weekly basis. And the IT guys were all doing their thing in Jira and different systems. And during the course of a week, we would put a deck together with about 40 different slides that summarized the status of every one of those streams. And I had a Microsoft project plan which just had each of the streams as though they were tasks. And so we had the milestones from each of those projects. We had to marry the business project with the IT project. And we would start that process, on a Monday. And all we could do in our PMO for the program was get that done by Friday. And it was an entirely static process. And we had 2 PCOs. It was crazy. So I have been through the pain. I know exactly how it is and how much administrative overhead there is when this kind of happens. So let's talk a little bit about the developer tribe. You know, developers, they like it simple. They obviously, as much as anybody else, like control over their own planning process. They don't really like documentation. That's true, right, guys? You know, they're interested in efficiency. They want to get their job done. Actually, mostly they want to focus on development and building good product. Paperwork is something most definitely that is secondary to most developers. Well, the thing about it is that Jira has been very, very successful in the development in Agile communities, and we know that. So let's talk about the project management tribe. We were helping a major bank in Toronto, and we were working with a PM whose job was to sort out the use of the Agile tools and kind of help the teams, you know, adopt good workflows and this kind of thing. And the PM basically, he was also in charge of a number of projects. And I was talking to him, and I said, you know, how are you managing these projects? His name was Jonathan. And he said, well, I've actually got them in Microsoft Project. And I said, well, what have you got in Microsoft Project? And he said, well, so he's a bit embarrassed, you know, he's like a bit furtive. And he said, well, I'll show you. So he shows me his Microsoft Project plan. And you know, I could have cried. He had Sprint 1, Sprint 2, Sprint 3. He had replicated the entire Jira reporting functionality because he didn't want to work in Jira. He was just familiar with his work breakdown structure, and for him, the sprint was just another thing that the teams were doing. And so when they finished their sprint, he would say, oh, it's finished. That's how he was reporting. And of course, he had his Microsoft PowerPoint slides as well. And I started digging around in this particular bank, and I discovered that they were all doing that, which is kind of crazy. But let's have a little show of hands as to how many people here actually think that a fair bit of that's going on in their organisation. Some. Come on. Yeah, tell me the truth. Okay. But project managers are tidy, they like a plan, they like structure, they like it organised, they have issue logs. Sadly, they put the issue logs in Excel spreadsheets where no one can find them, but nevertheless, at least they're tracking them, right? And so they provide order in the universe of complexity, and most organisations, have a very clearly understood set of things they're looking from PMs. Mostly PMP certified, right? That's usually the benchmark. Got to have that PMP certification from PMI, which is quite a rigorous test. And I know because I did it. It was a horrible test, actually. Any PMPs here? You kind of know what I'm talking about, right? Pretty hard test. But a very, very good professional qualification, and also fantastic disciplines and structures and so forth that go well beyond IT. If you were planning anything, you would have this certification or qualification, and it would help you really do a good job in terms of planning. Then there's the corporate planning tribe. Yeah, I thought I'd put that there for you just to kind of wake you up a bit. And it's not really that bad, but that's kind of what the other tribes think of these guys, Yeah, there's a lot of truth in there somewhere. But of course, that's not exactly the entire story, right? It is actually about cost containment. So probably about, I'm guessing 10 or 15 years ago, IT went through the renaissance of project management, structured, disciplined project management. That's when the PMPs all came in and things got more organized. There were a lot of things written about project failure, why projects failed, and I think a lot of it pointed to, at least there was a lack of discipline, and that the development tribe was sort of ruling the roost. And so the PMs came in and they structured it. But then I think corporations then couldn't figure out how much money they were spending, and even though they had, disciplined project managers driving the spend, they had lots of that going on and they had no control over it. Hence the arrival of Clarity or a Plan View or some of these ERP type systems which are horrible to use. I'm going to say that unashamedly, that my experience with those kind of ERP planning systems has been nothing short of tragic. And what they get used for is a lot of it is to do with budget management. So projects are approved, you get a code, and then, at the end of the month, everybody says which projects need what people for the next month, and then you have like 3 days. All the PMs put in their requests for resources. They assume they're going to get them because they have to have them, and then the line managers come in and say, no, we're changing all of that. And then suddenly the PMs find that, well, half the people disappeared, they were moved somewhere else, and that's kind of that. But nevertheless, at least it provided the necessity to manage cost, to have some control, and to have at least the finance department believe that they understood where all the IT spend was happening. And you really do need that kind of overall capacity, discipline. So I don't know how well you can see that. But I believe that the planning systems that we have today suffer from tribal bias, okay? And what I mean by that is that when we talk about, let's talk about the developer tribe. The developer tribe really, at the end of the day, is interested in time. They're interested in speed. That's what Agile really is one of the primary drivers for this. It's probably not so important to the development tribe about cost and scope. And I think Agile can be mostly ascribed to speed and time. Whereas PMs, I think, are the masters of scope. They're the ones who are going to say, yeah, we can do that. No, we're not going to do that. These are the things that we're responsible for. Issue management, scope management, very important to traditional project management. And it's pretty apparent that portfolio tools operate around the cost side of the world, okay? Now, the trouble with that is that in the traditional triple constraint model, it's quality in the middle, right? Well, I kind of cheated a bit and I've said, actually, I think the truth is more important, right? The truth is what we should be trying to understand. And none of these three tools potentially necessarily give us the kind of truth that we need to understand and manage a full PPM environment. So let's talk about some data. The first thing that I think is important to understand, and not a lot of people understand about the Atlassian tools, is the sheer scale and market share that Atlassian has. So I'm just going to take you through this fancy light works. No, it doesn't work very well. I'm going to walk over to one of these. Not surprisingly, Atlassian is in the Gartner ranking as a leader for the SDLC space. So there's a separate report that you can get on Gartner that says, Atlassian's in that space. The trouble with the Gartner report is that it only looks at qualitative considerations. You only have to sell $10 million worth of software to get into the Gartner report, okay? It doesn't look at market share. Version 1, which is a competitor of Atlassian's, actually does a fantastic report, and if you're interested, I'm happy to send you a link to it. But what version 1 are actually saying, and why wouldn't you believe them since they're a competitor, is that Atlassian has literally twice the size of the market share than the nearest competitor, which is TFS. Twice the size. What that's telling you is that in basically the vast majority of organizations that have SDLC, you're going to find Jira, right? Somewhere in there, Jira is preeminent. It's less likely than more likely that you would find Jira. It's everywhere. And so why is that kind of relevant? It's relevant because it's something that the developers are using. It's something that people are using. They're probably using it for testing, or using it to build their stories, putting their requirements in it. The actual act of building things is most likely always being done in Jira. And that provides a foundation for the case that PPM should always be built from Jira. Atlassian also did some research, which I don't know whether that they shared it with the wider community, but there's a whole little project that they did on scaling Agile and what people are doing. I'm going to go over to this one now. And so we were looking for some research that spoke to the different types of planning that were taking place in organizations. And as you can see, 48% of companies mix Agile and non-Agile techniques. Only 20% adhere to just pure Agile. So that also tells us that, and we believe this to be true. Based on my own experience, I believe this to be true. That really Agile is just a strong element of what the development teams are doing. It's certainly a wave of transformation that's taking place in organizations, but it just isn't the only planning things, not the only planning style that's taking place. The other thing is, if we as proponents of Atlassian, and Atlassian runs around saying every team, right? But I don't know whether you've seen Jira Core, it's kind of basic. Doesn't really, that's meant to be for every team. It's kind of falling short in my book a little bit. A couple of basic workflows, there we go. Every team can use Jira. I think you need to do better than that if you're going to say every team needs this product. Well, those teams like marketing, legal, HR, procurement, they don't use Agile, they don't use iterations. And why should they? They probably have a marketing event that they're going to run, and they've got a timeline, and they've got dependencies, and they've got Gantt charts, right? So if you want to support every team, you have to provide them tools that they can use, I think. So basically the enterprise disconnect looks, pretty straightforward. But I think it's fair to say that Excel, Microsoft Project, and Atlassian are the doing tools. There are some other doing tools out there, but they sure don't have much in the way of market share. So there is sort of a doing tool, and then there's the planning tools, and then there's the PowerPoint slides at the executive management level. And that's kind of how a lot of companies are running their IT. But I believe that the truth is built from the ground up. I think that the main problem today with these disconnected planning systems is that they simply can never keep up with the speed of what's going on down below. It's a bit of an oxymoron to say, let's give all these Agile teams the ability to go as fast as they can and encourage them to be as fast and nimble and agile as they can and have them deliver incredible results in 10-day sprints and 5-day sprints, and then say, yeah, let's do monthly reporting based on static analysis, from 2 weeks ago. Well, you've kind of completely missed the boat. So it's very difficult to do aggregated reporting if you're not building off the truth. But in truth, if you think about what Jira can offer you, when you take into account the add-ons, it really can deliver a fantastic job. Because with tempo timesheets, you've got all the time management you need linked to the projects, whether they're business, software, service desk. You can have portfolio and waterfall plans, and you can do budget management with tempo. Now, I'm going to show you a little bit of a demo of a product called Big Picture in a second. And we're going to talk a little bit about planning tools and kind of our point of view on it. We're also going to talk a little bit about how you can speak the language of the other tribes, and why speaking the language of the other tribes, I think, is particularly important. Of course, when we talk about that, what are we saying in practical terms? Well, we're really saying that as these Agile and other projects that could be waterfall projects are being built and constructed in Jira, we can still take advantage of plans, filters and budgets that seamlessly capture the information that's taking place below them. Okay, so let's talk about planning apps. Because Jira by itself isn't enough. Not even close, right? You need something different to add to the picture. So a couple of the, this isn't all of them. There's the structured Gantt, there's portfolio, there's WBS Gantt, and there's big picture. I guess one point that I kind of want to make to you about the marketplace, whenever you're looking at the marketplace, I suppose you realize that you can see how many people have downloaded the add-on, right? You know, you can see what people are doing, how many reviews there are. Big Picture has 5,000 downloads. I believe that the second add-on for planning is around 1,000. It's 5 times larger than any other product. Now, I'm going to make a distinction between Big Picture and Portfolio, because Portfolio is the Atlassian scaled Agile offering. And we're going to talk a little bit about Portfolio in a little bit. And Big Picture isn't perfect either, but Software Plant is focused entirely on making better Gantt. They've just released better dependency planning, and we pretty well like it. So the demo that I'm going to do for you, and when we get into this demo, I'm going to say this: I am not the technical expert. I'm going to show you the features, some high-level features. I'll try and answer some of your questions, but I may not know all the ins and outs of everything there. So if you really are really want to get into something in particular, and I don't have the answer for you right now, let's catch up afterwards, and I can arrange for somebody who's more into the weeds than I am. So we're going to create a plan. I'm going to show relationships with Jira projects. We're going to configure the plan. We're going to look at real-time status reporting. We're going to do some resource management, and actually I haven't put it there, but we're going to wrap up with a little bit on the budget side of things. Okay, so let's, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but let's see if I can do it. Okay. So this is a demo Jira system that we've set up. You can see it's pretty rich in terms of these add-ons for various demos. This is just a simple project that has, it's just a web app project. If you want to see the backlog, you can see it. You can see the sprints. It's just doing its own thing. It's minding its own business, ticking along, has its own reports. But what we can do is we can create another view of this plan in Big Picture. How many people are familiar with Portfolio? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. What's actually happened is that that project that we looked at is being pulled in from Jira into this add-on in a completely different way, in a completely different interface. Think of Plan and Jira Project, but also think of Plan as being any set of filters, any JQL query, any set of projects. You could have the whole Jira portfolio sucked into a plan, okay? And so what Big Picture does is it allows you then to have your own hierarchy, your own WBS. And you can see across here, it's got the indent, the outdent, all that stuff. And guess what? It looks like Microsoft Project, right? Right? It kind of looks like Microsoft Project a bit, right? It looks more like Microsoft Project than Portfolio does. And I believe that adopting tools that have a bit of a similar look and feel to things that people are familiar with is a critical success factor in gaining that buy-in to get people to plan together. Because what's the use of a Microsoft Project plan? It's good in an analytical sense, but what happens? Every week the PM takes their plan, set up a conference call, and they say, task 15 that was supposed to be due on Thursday. Did you do it? What's the status of it? Ticks the box and moves on, right? And that's the definition of a Microsoft, a live, real-time plan. Well, what's happening in here is that as these things are happening in the release and the sprints, So instead of my buddy at the bank, who's building his sprints as tasks in Microsoft Project, that's the real sprint. Okay? That's picking up that project. And I'll just show you how that happens. So if you go over here, to the configuration section, you can just see that you can pull in the web app Scrum board, or you can pull in a filter for any number of projects for a JSON query. Now, that hierarchy that I created in this plan is unique to the plan. Okay, I can have any work breakdown structure I want. I could just completely ignore that I have another Jira project, that I have anything else, and I could just start building tasks, those Microsoft project, in that plan, just because I want to have a marketing plan, or I want to have a ops plan, or I want to have just my own work breakdown structure, because I'm a planner, and work breakdown structures are very important to me. I need the flexibility to have that work breakdown structure the way that I want it. One of the issues with portfolio is that, let me see if I can bring this up. I think I've got access. That's a good thing. Sales bill. Atlassian. Go down to portfolio. One hierarchy.
I have a team.
One hierarchy, okay? The way portfolio functions, and we begged Atlassian to change it, but they haven't done it, is that there is only one configurable hierarchy in an instance. And you have to create issue types for each of those hierarchical levels. So we wrote a safe paper, white paper that's out there, if there are any left, which shows you the safe levels and the issue types. And then you can set up another project to store those issue types in that project, and all this stuff, right? Things about that are problematic are that how do you get everybody to agree on one configurable hierarchy? The moment somebody says, I want something else, well, they can't have it. If you want to change the configurable hierarchy, the challenge is that if you insert something in the middle of it, like some other level, all the children are lost for every plan, okay? So to me, portfolio was built for a company that is very disciplined, has only one planning style, okay? And is okay with that. And there's nothing particularly wrong with that. Let's say you're running a 100-person shop, 200-person shop, and you've said, oh, this is the way we're going to build software. This is where we're going to plan. And we're not going to support other planning styles. This is what we're going to do. Portfolio is probably the most powerful tool. And there are some benefits in terms of forecasting it's called fake resources or something like that anyway, that it does have. So there are some benefits to it. But this one kind of like thing about the configurable hierarchy really does make it problematic, in my opinion, for any enterprise that wants to have and support multiple planning styles. Now, the other thing to think about is you could have both. Nothing's stopping you. This instance has both portfolio and it has big picture. So you could say, for those people who want to go down this road with this unilateral must have this hierarchy, oh, there it is. Thank you. Yeah, you can see here that you can set this up. You have to assign the issue type to this, and there's only one of them. And it's managed from the central configuration. It's not managed at the project level. One day, if they ever get that, fix that, I think it would be good. So that's the fun story with that. Okay, let's go back to big picture. So I want to talk about status reporting now, because we talked about the problems of static status reports. So what I love about big picture is that this area of the plan, which is very similar to an MS Project view, allows you to see the status of what's going on in multiple dimensions. So why don't we go back to the configuration section for a second and take a bit of a look at what's happening, because it's quite sophisticated. So unlike an MS Project, What is going on here is that this plan can synchronize with different objects in the subsidiary projects. So for instance, if I want to bring in sprints, backlog, you see here, that's telling it that for that particular project, bring in the real sprints. So that you can see the status of that sprint through the lens of the big picture master view. So it's more than just a Gantt chart. It's actually a status reporting engine. And when you look at the way that the view is, it's called a perspective. And a perspective, you can have multiple perspectives to the project. So that left-hand side, right, that I showed you before, that's called a perspective. And you're able to pick any of the custom fields available to you across the entire system, plus all the standard fields. So you can look at your plan in any way you want. Now, unfortunately, this version of the browser doesn't support this add-on called traffic lights. Okay, if you're a PM, recovering PM like me, and you know that people want traffic lights, there's an add-on that gives you traffic lights, right? You type in red, yellow, or green, and it comes up with red, yellow, or green. So it kind of funky, and it just speaks to the need for traditional planners to have some way of looking at things through the lens of traffic lights, right? So we get you to them. But more sophisticated still is this idea that whilst I brought these custom fields in, I can configure them. So that little wheel in the field actually allows me to control how the parent gets its status. So what this is telling you, and this is a very important planning concept because it speaks directly to what does it mean behaviorally when I see a status, right? I may believe that I want children by status percentage. So let's, and again, just to remind you, once I can have any hierarchy I want, so it's auto-magically recalculating everything that I put underneath that child as soon as I indent it in the work breakdown structure. So what it's saying is that at the parent level, I may have 100 items or issues in it, and it'll tell me, 30 of them haven't started, 50 of them are in the process, and maybe 30 of them are being tested, right? That's kind of, I want to know that. Like, I'd like to know that across all my projects, or I'd like to see that across many different dimensions. So this plan is working in harmony with the underlying teams and what they're doing. And I can build this plan any way I want to, and the underlying Jira projects wouldn't even know necessarily that I was there, right? When I change that, when I indent that structure, I go back to the Gantt. Let's just say that I'm indent this guy. This won't change anything in the underlying project. It's just a hierarchical structure in this plan. But I can have a look at this. And it's just the same, I think, as structure and a lot of the others. I can actually see the context of my work breakdown structure when I look at the item. That's a pretty standard feature in these tools, right? Okay. So I kind of got this story. It's got dependencies too. I think let me see if I can bring up the dependency. It's quite powerful with dependencies. I'm not very familiar with this setup here. I built a dependency before here. So you can just drag and drop dependencies. And if you click on the dependency, it'll ask you what kind of dependency do I want. And a lot of effort's been done, investment has been done in this dependency management because PMs actually really like this. Just another note on dealing with software plants. We found them very responsive when we were working with a very large telco. We were doing a gig where we had to deal with their developers on some things, and they were very interested to get the feedback. So I found them to be a good organisation to work with. Okay. So this is a module that I'm not as familiar with, but I also want to make sure it's all set up. All team members. Yeah. So this typically tells you, and it's not, the data is not that great here, but really it rolls up in terms of at an individual level, because that's what we're looking at. These are all real people in the system. As they get assigned work, you can see what their available capability is on any given day and what the total is. And then if you switch to the team view, you can see how much available resource there is and the allocation. So there's a full team and resource management side to this, which is very important. And when it comes to the team setup, you'll see it's got synchronized with tempo. So this is another very, very important point. Portfolio has its own teams. It doesn't have tempo teams. It doesn't even know that tempo teams exist. So if you go down the tempo road, where teams is a kind of a part of the base time management application, and tempo time management is really the largest and the only option for time management, we feel. And it's very sophisticated, it's a fantastic app. But typically you would probably want to take advantage of tempo teams. Well, you can do that here. It's not as good a synchronization as we like to see, but it does have that connection. And there's also a whole bunch of stuff you can do here with workload plans, holiday plans, skills. You've got the story point velocity translated into time, that kind of thing. So that's really the kind of the big picture side of it. When it first launched in the market, it was a little buggy, no question, but they really worked very hard to get it to be robust, and it's now on the cloud as well as on server. All right, let's go back to my PowerPoint. Just a couple of other things about planning in general. Issue types. Because that big picture doesn't care what issues are in the plan, you can have any issue type in your plan. Obviously, you saw that releases were in the plan, sprints were in the plan, but if you have if you want to add milestones to your plan because they're externally imposed upon you by senior management, you can drop milestones really nicely in here, and I think that's really the kind of flexibility that you're going to want to see. You can have deliverables. We have templates for all of these issue types that are standard that we can inject into a client system. So let's talk a little bit about budgets. And I'm going to go through this relatively quickly because it's kind of boring and it's not an area that I know too well. But the only real product out there right now that's kind of native inside Jira that does, big corporate planning type adding up costs is budgets. We recommend a combination of budgets and EasyBI. Because EasyBI also provides some terrific flexible reporting. So rather than get all your reporting inside each app, EasyBI allows you to look across all your projects and your apps and pick out certain data sets. So the way budgets basically works is that it's kind of picking off So you remember we talked about teams and people? Basically, budgets introduces the concept of a rate card or a cost card. And so when all that time is entered into the system by all these people doing all this work, it's saying, yep, oh, and that's $100 an hour, or that's $80 an hour, or that's $250 an hour. It has a bit of a clunky hierarchy. It has its own terms for portfolios, and I don't remember exactly what they are. So you kind of have to navigate your way around that. But it's got a whole bunch of reports, and I would say that it's probably not going to be, you know, in the same order of magnitude as a Clarity or as a plan view or one of those systems. But it's real time, okay? It's not a feed. I mean, those systems might have terrific reporting, but how does the data get in there in the first place? Well, we've got an army of people costing you a fortune to get the data in. You know, I would argue that I'd rather have half the reporting in a real-time system and live with accuracy than all these fancy reports, which, you know, essentially cost millions of dollars, you know, to implement. That's kind of my take on it. So I think you have to, and the same is true of Microsoft Project. So if you get a die-hard MS Project planner and say to them, I want to show you this big picture chart thing, they'll come up with something that it can't do. They'll say, what about negative lag? Negative lag, I really love negative lag. Negative lag, really? Like I know what that is, which is terrible.
What is negative lag?
Negative lag, I think, is where you can schedule the task to start earlier than another task finishes, something like that. And there's certain there's certain constraints about it. It's very obscure. It's not recommended. But these, you know, people have their thing, right? And it'll be something else, right? So again, you've got to sort of say to your constituents as you talk to them about this, yes, it's true. It doesn't do everything that MS Project does, but it will save you hours and hours of status gathering, and you'll have real-time reports, and it's good enough. So there are trade-offs in that regard, and so you can get total cost views in budgets. You can get all these trend lines. Not quite sure what that means. And you can see here that the model for adding the costs, you know, to teams. So I did want to go back actually. So did forget to mention that when you are let's go back to the big picture. Let's go back to Program Manager. Program Manager looks at the world in terms of all of the programs that you have in the system. So it can build a Gantt now of your portfolio, right? So for every one of those plans, that web app plan that I showed you before, it's also rolling into this view. Now, the only problem with this particular view of this is very flat. So if I wanted to, like, say, web app was part of a program of programs, I wanted to build it underneath, I wouldn't be able to do that. It's very flat. It's nice, I like it, but it doesn't do it for us. So we recommend that you create an issue type called project. In fact, there's a great talk that Scott and Scott did, I think, the CEOs at one of the summits. I think it was about 3 years ago, and it was on Project Central. In Atlassian's Jira, they have an issue type called project, and every week, every project that Atlassian has gets updated by somebody. Is it alive? Is this project being done? And what's happening to it? So they do have their own view of the world that looks like that. And so if you create an issue type called project, you can just create a program of projects or a program of programs. So you can see here, I've rolled in a number of different projects, and these are projects in their own right, because we made an issue type of project, right? So if you have your projects in Jira, and you have a project issue type, it's It can have a custom field which takes you to the project. So now you can roll that project into your portfolio view, and you can have them any way you want, right? You can see what the status is of those projects. That's kind of a little bit of a tip to kind of get the most out of it. Allow teams to use native Agile, and at the same time create hierarchical planning views as needed. I think, you know, if you start telling Agile teams what they have to do, top down, you're going to start to lose the pure value of Agile. You kind of want, I mean, them being in Jira is a way of scaling, but having a planning view, like I've showed you, really does allow those teams to go fast and hard, and for us to see at the same time what's going on across that view. Configurable hierarchies are very important for all teams, not one configurable hierarchy. If you tell a PM or program manager the WBS has to be like this, that's going to stop and go somewhere else. Go somewhere where they can build their own plan and they won't play in the same sandbox with you. And I think Agile can scale in alternative ways. I worry, you know, that people select SAFe and find that it's a bigger enterprise transformation than they realize. I worry that there are numerous ways to scale Agile. I think you need to learn how and go through a process. And so it kind of comes back to that hierarchical model that we were talking about. So encourage all teams to work in Jira by supporting all planning. Get the PMs in a room and say, you can do this. Let me show you how. It's not as scary as it looks. See? You can look at it like this. And I think that's important. And so finally, my sort of recommendation is to enable the different tribes to play in the one sandbox. That's it. Any questions? Yeah.
Dealing with material and other type expenses, equipment expenses, with project planning. Can you factor those in also?
I believe the budget does that. The budget has an expense management module, yeah. But I'd have to get back to you on the details. Yeah. It's got, budgets allows you to have capital, CapEx, spend, computers, like, it's a quasi-financial tool. So expenses is definitely included in that.
Right. Well, aside from the cost, but to actually have as requirements to say that testing can't proceed unless this equipment's there. Development can't proceed unless these materials are present.
Right. Well, again, I mean, there's one thing which is the cost associated with that. Those might be tasks that, again, would fall in a big picture plan because they're not part of an Agile exercise, right? They would be, you might say, okay, I've got 3 Agile teams, they're busy doing their thing. I want to say, look, there's this milestone called all the equipment must be here. You could stick that in your big picture plan. You could say there's a dependency between that and all this other stuff. And you will know that that's the case, right? Because that's what you put in your plan. But the teams don't necessarily need to see that.
Right, that's where I was wondering, because if you're building everything based off of queries and views and stuff, that there are stuff that's not seen by the developers that has to happen in the background as procedural for things to proceed. So that's why I'm wondering if there's capacities for that.
That's right. That's exactly what big picture gives you. You can put in anything you want in that plan, but you can see the progress of those Agile teams unencumbered in conjunction with any of those considerations that you, the planner, wants to put on them. So we have Scrum-Fall is the classic. I mean, you can see methodologies across the board where there's this planning phase, then there's this iterative phase, and then there's hardening phase, and then there's release phase, right? I mean, that's fairly common. Well, that's waterfall with some iteration in the middle of it, right? And that is really the only way to do that well is in a big picture type of product, right? Because otherwise you just end up with a Microsoft project plan. or some other divorced tool, right? Any other questions?
So,
yeah.
The hierarchy is completely arbitrary. It could be anything, links to anything.
Yeah.
And that you found that scales. Because what I've done when I've been evaluating all these tools, and the reason why I keep coming back to portfolio is, even if you can only have that one hierarchy, since you're forced into the right order, each team is going to have their hierarchy be consistent. You know, they're used to the idea of, well, this story links to this epic, and it's the same sort of action that they have to do to say this epic links to this feature links to this product. I haven't seen, at least in my organization, how you can use issue links or any other kind of organizational hierarchy consistently enough for it to make sense at a higher level.
But first of all, your organization may be very consistent, right? Any client we have that has, say, more than 1,000 users, I can point to you 3 different ways that they're aggregating what's happening, you know, at a tactical level. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, yeah, I mean, Big Picture was designed with the idea that inside the plan, you can have whatever hierarchy you want. So it's built to scale that way. The problem that Atlassian has with the portfolio product is that they didn't build it that way. They just didn't do it. And I would argue that it's not really a scaling issue, it's a design question. Because when we ask them, they're like, well, why can't everybody plan the same way? And we're like, well, what are you talking about? That's just not what happens out there. Like, some organizations do. Like, if your organization says, yeah, we can do it this way, that's great.
But someone could put a subtask issue type at the top level of your hierarchy. It just doesn't make logical sense.
No, I'm not saying that that all plans are good plans. Like, you're right. But you know, that's more a question of, like, did they get any training? Does anybody look at the plans that they're producing? I mean, I'm a bit more of a free market character when it comes to planning, as opposed to saying there's this one way that we all have to plan together. If you look at WBS across large programs in Microsoft project plans or whatever planning tools there are, they are widely different. Widely different. And they're all successful, right? You pay a top-notch PM or a top-notch planner for their expertise at building plans. You kind of have to give them the right tools, the flexibility to do that. If they're building bad plans, then don't hire them, right? So, we can talk about it, you know, some more. Yeah. You got a question?
Yeah. For companies that are implementing Scrum and Kanban combines, how does portfolio deal with the combines?
Portfolio or?
Well, portfolio. They might be using Kanban for hardware, for instance, development, working then with software on the Scrum side.
I'm trying to remember how Kanban rolls into a portfolio. I mean, portfolio doesn't really understand, you know, flow statuses in the same way, because what Kanban is really just like, I've got 20 things here, I've got 30 things there, I've got 40 things here, and they're moving through this cycle. It's just, that's just not really much that I would do with portfolio. Like, I would argue, why would I bother with putting a Kanban project into portfolio in the first place? I would kind of not bother. I would just say, go off, do your Kanban thing. What I might do is I might say, I showed you that neat little status by, you know, thing, a number of statuses. I could easily suck a Kanban project into my big picture plan, and I could say, let's do this by component, and let's see how many of these components have so many widgets in this status versus that status versus the other status. And so very quickly I could take a look at 6 Kanban projects that way, and I'd know right away, this one has what? That one's falling behind, this one's okay, and so on. So I think, again, you know, flexibility of how I choose to report on the data is kind of important. If you have only one portfolio, if you only have one hierarchy in portfolio, and the Kanban board doesn't really live with that, I don't know what you're supposed to do with it. Okay, I think people want to see the next preso and get a drink.
Okay. Good.